Welcome to Exotic Gardening with me, Yorkshire Kris. On this week's episode, I'm actually going to be ripping up part of my garden. If you joined me last time where I talked about my plans for this year and into 2026, we talked about the 3 different areas I'm going to be changing over the coming months and year. And I'll do a link to that in the description below. But today we're going to focus on the end of the garden and the journey around the paths, the gravel paths, over the decking areas and into my eucalyptus and tree fern area. So let's get to it. So one of the first jobs I've got to do is actually remove the weed suppressing membrane that we have in this area. And down here, what we have is lots and lots of wood chips or forest bark that was put down years ago when we had a play area in this area. It's a nice soft landing space when you've been on the swing and a climbing frame. And over that time, it's degraded and it's turned into some decent sort of wood fines now. So I'm actually going to just scrape this off and put it in a pile in the middle of the palm area behind, and we can definitely reuse that as top dressing around the garden. There's also lots and lots of eucalyptus leaves and other debris as well. But underneath this, if I scrape it back, you can see we've got the weed suppressing membrane down here, and it's actually pretty well put down because I've got all the pegs in to securely fasten it when we put it down. But all that thickness, which we've probably had about 5 to 10 centimeters of wood chips down here, it's completely gone down to what, maybe like 2 or 3 centimeters, something like that. So it's really degraded, but turning some decent sort of material that I can use around the garden. So that's the first job, is taking this back and seeing what we have underneath. So I've quickly found my first problem of this makeover, and that is I've got some big woody roots that are above and below the weed suppressing membrane, and it's matted all. This is all the wood chip that's degraded, but it's now full of roots. No seedlings or weeds really have come through here, so these roots are from whatever is at the end of these thicker roots here, and I'm not 100% certain what they are. They could be from the eucalyptus behind, potentially. They're not palm roots, and I don't think they're the tetrapanax roots either, because they're too woody for that, with fibrous roots coming off. So they could even be from a laurel from a far distance, or a conifer, but we're talking a good 4 or 5 meters away from this point in the garden to the nearest potential suspect. So I'm not certain what they are, and it's made it very hard to pull up all this membrane because it's all matted in, and when you start pulling it up, it comes up in strands. So we'll see how I get on with this. I might, if I find it too difficult, might leave this in place and then just dig through the areas which I'm going to plant into. But I wanted to really ideally get it all up so I could put my paths and dig and put plants without worrying about having the plastic membrane in the ground. I mean, it does let water through and it does stop big weeds going through it, but it doesn't stop weeds growing under it or over it, or roots growing under it or over it. So I'm not certain exactly what will happen with this. Like I said, I can pull on this root and it's gone quite deep down, this one. So I'm not certain what I'll find when I take up the rest of this, if I decide to do so. What I do know is, as soon as I take up this wood here, this decking, all along here, we have big tree stumps, or we did do, what, 10, 11 years ago. That's why this path is in this position. It's to go over those tree stumps, should I say. So we didn't have to dig up the stumps, we could just have the path going over and around them. But now I think after 10 years, they should have hopefully rotted down enough so that I can actually dig them up where needed for where the paths are going to go, or leave it in situ if it's going to be a planting area. So we'll find out soon when I dig this up what we find underneath. So now you can see I've started taking up the decking path, and this was the one I was most worried about because I knew I had lots of big tree stumps underneath, or I did do 10-12 years ago when we put the decking down. So what I found is that the actual tree stump, this is one of the main ones, that was the silver birch. As you can see, it's all thankfully rotted away or rotting away. And to be honest, it was doing that when they were still growing. The trunks were actually rotting on the silver birch trees, so they weren't healthy trees at all, so it's quite easy to cut these down. But I've got this weed suppressing membrane which has done its job. No weeds came up between the paths, between the decking boards, and we had loads of gravel to hold that down. So it did a good job of doing that, although you didn't see that because it was all covered up. Served its purpose now. And what I'm going to hopefully find is underneath here, the roots, because there were big fat roots, big as my arm, from the silver birches going in all directions. Hopefully those roots have rotted as well. I've also noticed the posts that I attached to my uprights are completely rotten as well. Look at that. That wouldn't have lasted much longer. In fact, that's completely rotted through. So they were just softwood posts, which obviously in contact with the ground don't last too long at all. But the actual wood I used for the sides, this treated wood, has done a remarkably good job. There's no rot whatsoever in this. These are good, strong boards. And if I had another use for them, I probably could reuse these because they're completely strong. There's no rot whatsoever, unlike the decking boards, which were showing some age, the posts and sleepers when we did the gravel paths a couple of years ago. So if I was going to do this again, I probably wouldn't use sleepers. I would use this treated, thick, chunky boards, which aren't as thick as sleepers, but they are very, very strong and very, very rot resistant, as we've seen here in my pretty damp garden. So the next stage is to carry on taking up the paths. I'm not going to take up all the paths. I still need a path to actually bring my topsoil and my gravel down the garden, so I'm going to leave that till the end. I've got a stretch that I'm keeping, but all this path around behind me, all the way around this area, I'm going to take up all that. We'll see what's underneath. We'll take away all this wood that's for no use, all these pieces of decking boards, but we might find a new purpose for some of these good pieces of timber. And then we'll also see what's underneath the weed suppressing membrane. So there we have it. I've took up quite a lot of the decking here. So I've done this full stretch going back towards the tree ferns over there, and then let's take a closer look. So I've done this side here. Got obviously the waste wood to get rid of. As we go down and turn right, I've got rid of most of the wood going down that way, and then we'll turn this way, and you can see that I've done all this side as well. And if we go through here back to where the gravel path is and turn around, we can see how we're going to take this gravel path and curve it into where that bamboo is a bit, rather than taking the linear route through there. And I've got a lot of issues to deal with. We've got all this gravel, we've got all this debris, wood, glass, and a water pipe going through here to a tap down there. So I've got to deal with this and remove that. I've also got to carry on, take up all that decking over there, because that's going to be a planting area. But we're going to concentrate on this path for the next stage. And you can see how deep the wood siding is, and it shows you really how everything was or is in a raised bed hidden raised beds. That's a good 25-30 centimetres between the bottom of the gravel, the top of the gravel, to the base of that soil there where that wood is. So that is a raised bed where we've got big palm trees in there now. So we've still got all this to take up, but this wood has done an excellent job of keeping obviously the plants from growing across into the path, and especially further down where the bamboo is. So if you just go back down here, we've got the Phylostachus bamboo, and it's been kept back by this barrier. But as soon as I take this up and move the path a bit, this bamboo will be able to go where it wants. So I'm going to have to think about trying to stop that going where I don't want it to go, which is in the new path. So I'll have to consider that. Obviously the metal sidings of it will stop it going through the first 15 centimetres, but it can easily go under that and through. So we'll see how we deal with that. And then if we just come up, here is where the path is going to come through, and I want the path to actually go where this double-headed tree fern is. So this double-headed tree fern, I'm going to have to move all that because the path is going to go through here, and it's going to go forward and around the eucalyptus and come out into this area. And I said I was going to fill this with soil planting, but I'm not certain I'm going to do that now. What I think I might do is actually build up soil beds around the edges where the bamboos are, so we can plant some of the tree ferns in this area, but leave the middle still pretty open before we continue a path going down through the back end there and then back down to the gravel path beyond. So that's the latest idea. Will we just have planting areas rather than this full with plants? But there's a heck of a lot to do before we get to that stage. Need to clear all this, get rid of all the wood, all the decking that I don't want, and then move on to carrying on clearing all this side. And back to those tree trunks I was worried about. As you can see, my spade's gone straight through the middle of a previous tree stump. So if I lift it up, you can see that is a tree stump that's rusted away nicely over the last 10 or so years. So I'll be able to dig over this area, plant into it, and it shouldn't be an issue at all. So if you ever have a tree stump you want to get rid of, cover it over, give it a good 10 years, and fingers crossed it should rust it away like this. But obviously I'm only partly joking there, because obviously if you don't want to wait 10 years and you need a stump grinder to get rid of a tree stump, I've just been lucky that I've been able to cover it up and wait 10 years to make life a bit easier for myself. So join me next time, as hopefully we'll have progressed a bit further and my plans will become a little bit clearer for this part of the garden. And don't forget, there's still other jobs we're going to be doing. We've got the middle part of the garden where we're going to be changing that, the arid bed area, and then we've also further down the garden, closer to the house, we've got all the area that we're going to be changing as well, the tropical jungle style area that will be changing the paths and the whole dynamics of that area, opening it up. So thank you for watching this edition of Exotic Gardening UK. Join me next time as we're doing more in the garden.